About that.
Today is February 16th, 2020, Sunday. This is Joseph Ramirez here, together with Bravo, and we are beginning our first podcast. Bravo?
Yeah, welcome. I think it's going to be important to establish a title or a name for the show. So I think that we should most likely begin with that, right? So, what is this that you're listening to? Thanks for tuning in.
Um, so I want to first let's start by introducing ourselves. I'm Joseph Allen Ramirez. I am a Southern California resident, born and raised here. I was my father is from Guatemala, and my mother is Caucasian. Um, this podcast is pertaining to Central America, the spiritual needs of that country, and even immigration. And the reason I'm interested in this topic is my dad was a war refugee. He fled Guatemala in 1974 along with his brothers in very desperate circumstances. And so I myself have learned so much about Guatemala and immigration through my family and half siblings I have in Guatemala who have moved here and helped them with their immigration work. And God has just drawn me closer and closer to this issue and the spiritual root of it as well. So, so I do. I'm really thankful to have a wonderful ministry partner, Bravo, here with me, and I'll let him take it off from here.
Yes, thank you for that brief testimony, Joe. I do appreciate that. Yeah, so I'm B. You can call me Bravo. It's short, right? B. Um, I am son of illegal immigrants. They also, my parents, fled a type of persecution in Guatemala in the 80s. And thankfully, when they got here to this beautiful country, it adopted us. It adopted us just as Christ adopts us into sonship. We are co heirs with him. In the same way, this nation wrapped its flag around me. And I had the highest honor of my life to serve in the United States Marine Corps for 8 years. I served during Operation Iraqi Freedom and Operation Enduring Freedom. And I would say that that was one of the most formative moments of my life. It then, it was there, it was in my, during my time in the military that I saw how can I put this, just a pain, a suffering abroad. It's, particularly my first deployment, sometimes when we have these firsts, we tend not to forget them. And on my first deployment, I remember connecting so much with the local populace, being interested as though it was my burden to carry what they went through every day. And I guess like that created a people to love in me. And that's why I would like to understand this topic so much more. For me, this is a very valuable topic. I enjoy a type of political theology, if you will, the political implications in Scripture.
Mm.
This is something that's very near and dear to my heart because it asks us what we should do and how we should respond politically, if even at all. For political implications in Scripture, though not clear, but definitely pointed. One example that comes to mind quickly is the political death of Christ.
Mm-hmm.
Notice how he went to the cross for all to see.
Amen.
So this was nothing hidden, right? It began and ended very very outwardly as a, as a as a, I guess, as a tragedy, as an injustice. So that's a little bit about myself, and that's a little bit about what this means to me. I had the wonderful privilege of going to Honduras in 2015, the end of 2015 and beginning of 2016, on
Yes.
a what's interesting, on a mission trip that I funded almost entirely by myself.
Wow.
I started in El Salvador, went to Guatemala,
Mm-hmm.
went to Honduras,
The
and
entire Northern Triangle.
right, went to exactly,
Yeah.
exactly. And I just what was so neat was to spend time with people there. How much love I encountered there in amidst poverty.
Yes.
So this is very real. This is this is a very important topic, and I'm glad that you're listening. I'm glad that we can have this discussion free of criticism. Again, this is not something that any one person or side should be right or wrong.
Mm-hmm.
Rather, we exist together, right? So we're not picking sides here.
Yes.
We're noticing that there is an injustice. So I'd like to invite you all to have that conversation with Joseph and I. As we learn more, as we unpack what's going on, welcome.
Yes. So this podcast is pertaining to Central America, to specifically a political crisis that's been unfolding in Honduras since 2009, and the spiritual implications of what's happening there. We're talking about the political crisis. I mean, there's the worldly part, but there's the spiritual part too. So, what's been happening in Honduras to catch everybody up? In June 2009, the president of Honduras, named Manuel Zelaya, was overthrown by his own military. He was doing a policy that many in the Honduran elite did not like, of trying to change the constitution of Honduras. He was accused of trying to extend his term limits. So in June 2009, he was arrested and captured by the military of Honduras in his own home, in his pajamas, and was forced onto a plane, flown to exile in Costa Rica. And after that, the majority of the Honduran population started protesting against this, and they wanted their president back. And a lot of human rights violations occurred. The security forces of Honduras began detaining and attacking the protesters, and a new wave of political assassinations began happening in Honduras that have continued to this day, nearly 11 years later. It is very tragic. Honduras has gone back to what it was in the 1970s and 80s. It is a country of injustice. There is so many political assassinations in this country. Journalists are killed every year in this country, and environmental activists, anybody who stands up against injustice in Honduras, including human rights lawyers, NGOs, which stands for non-governmental organizations. And the government of Honduras does not change its behavior, and all this violence has caused an exodus from Honduras. So many people are fleeing. Many people here in the United States have different opinions about this subject, which is what we're going to also discuss.
That's interesting. I think you bring up an interesting point. So let me ask you this then, for just for clarity's sake.
Yes.
What are we talking about? Because you mentioned something really important there at the end, as far as this mass exodus.
Yes.
Okay, so and while I was speaking, you mentioned the Northern Triangle.
Yes.
So what is that? What's the mass exodus? How does that, like, why is that important to me here in America today?
Yes, that's an excellent question. This crisis, this exodus, not only affects Central America and Mexico, but also the United States. Most of these people from Honduras are fleeing for the U.S. border for a better life. and that definitely affects the illegal immigration debate. Many Hondurans are trying to enter the United States illegally. A lot of them. This is the fourth poorest country in the Western Hemisphere, and that needs to be said. Um, Number one is Haiti. Number two is Nicaragua. Number three is Suriname, which is in South America, and number four is Honduras. There is no middle class in Honduras, and to immigrate to the United States, they have to have a certain amount of income to um, be counted. So with the immigration thing, you do have to have enough money to immigrate to this country, or you will be viewed as a burden to society. Um, there's pros and cons with this. We could go into that in our discussion. As a result, people are so desperate in violent circumstances that they don't care about the waiting process and will just get up and leave with their families and try to have a better life either in Mexico or the United States. And this has sparked a huge debate about border walls and increased ICE raids and all these things. So that affects us, Bravo. And
So in 2005, Hurricane Stan
yes,
devastated uh, Honduras, and so that's left a lot of people without homes as well. So now you multiply that with increased violence, with increased poverty, and you get this sort of mass exodus that we're experiencing. These
yes,
caravans.
yes.
This is not something recent now, is
No,
it?
it is not recent.
How long has this been going on?
Really, since the coup in 2009.
Hmm.
But I would like to add that there was also another hurricane in 1998 called Hurricane Mitch that
Hmm.
destroyed the banana industry in Honduras. And bananas are the main export of Honduras. It's really their main source of income, along with textiles and coffee.
Hmm.
And so when the banana industry was wrecked in '98, uh, the United States actually did do a TPS for that's temporary protected status, the abbreviation, by the way. Many Hondurans were allowed temporary residence in this country after that Hurricane Mitch in
Hmm.
1998. Currently, that temporary protected status has just recently ended in the last 2 years, and now Hondurans are being required to be sent back to Honduras.
Hmm.
And many Hondurans do not want to return because the country has actually gone worse in the last 11 years, and they are very scared to go back to
Yeah.
Honduras. Another important thing that Bravo and I will discuss is the U.S. role in this. These things are interconnected. So we want to clarify, we before we say anything, we do not hate the United States. Um, we are proud to be in this country. As Christians, though, we are temporary residents here. Our eternal citizenship is in heaven. So we do not hate the United States, but we do not. We do sometimes have to address policies that are bad, and we say that from a Christian moral perspective, from our Christian principles. Uh, the United States is supporting the government of Honduras, which I have to say, because I cannot lie, it is an authoritarian and repressive government in Honduras. Ever since that coup in 2009, um, with the and there's many reasons the United States has a big interest in Honduras. Since 1983, the United States has had a military base in Honduras called the Sotocano Air Base, where the U.S. Has U.S. Southern Command's Joint Task Force Bravo hosted
Hmm.
at the Sotocano Air Base. The government of Honduras is very friendly to keeping this. The United States also gets a lot of bananas and coffee from Honduras. U.S. companies such as Chiquita Fruits and Dole have a large presence there. The government of Honduras is very friendly and will allow those companies to buy whatever land they want. And also, we could get cheap clothing from sweatshops in Honduras. And so, the United States government prefers the economic benefits from it, and is sadly okay and complacent with a regime that represses its own people as long as it fulfills the economic demands of the United States. And so what we have is also the U.S. military aid to Honduras. The U.S. is the biggest supplier of military aid to Honduras. We supply the machine guns and also U.S. military advisors to train Honduran security forces, but then there's no accountability with their behavior. And there's so many incidents of Honduran soldiers killing protesters who protest against the government. This has really intensified since 2017, when there was a controversial election when the current president of Honduras, Juan Orlando Hernandez, decided to change the constitution of Honduras in 2015 to run for a second term, which was the whole basis of the coup in 2009, saying that Manuel Zelaya had no right to change the constitution to have a second term. And when Juan Orlando Hernandez did it, there was no opposition in the government. But the people were very opposed to this. And so when he ran for a second term in 2017, there was the OAS, which stands for the Organization of American States, viewed the election as rigged and not fair, and requested that that Honduras run another election. And the Honduran government said no. Many people protested, demanding it, and elite military police units in Honduras, trained by the United States, killed 23 Honduran people between November 2017 and January 2018. Following that violence is when the caravans really intensified.